Hello there. This is Jen T. Grace, founder of Publish Your Purpose. And I'm here today with Amelia J. Michael. And I'm so excited. Like I'm always excited for book launches, but I have like an extra sense of excitement with yours because your book is so important right now, like even more than we already knew it was important. So before I go down a whole bunch of rabbit holes and ask you a whole bunch of questions, I would love for you to kind of just start off and give high level, who's Amelia and what are you up to in the world?
High level, who am I? I am a teacher and I work for the last 30 years at the intersection of tech and gender. My specialty, I think the term is serial entrepreneur. I've owned businesses for 30 years. I started with an IT company. I specialized in law firms. I was a process consultant. I was a change management specialist. But really, I'm a teacher and my specialty is helping people overcome the things that make them uncomfortable. And the two biggest are technology and gender. And so this book actually came from things I learned teaching technology as a process consultant. I used to see in businesses that there were all of these little silos. So company department would get software to do a thing, and then other department would get software to do a thing, but they was doing the same thing, two different softwares. And I started speaking on gender inclusion to businesses, and then I started to see the exact same silos. That one department, they did a 2-hour workshop, they're great. Now the other department hasn't done or seen anything, and everyone isn't all on the same page about what it looks like to be inclusive. So this book sort of honestly just kind of came out of a very clear need that I saw. And then I spent 3 years writing it.
You know, it's so, I remember when we were first talking where you were basically saying like it's gender and tech. And I'm like, how do these two things make any sense together? But
Yeah.
You just said it so clearly though, because I just remember being like, that's an interesting Venn diagram. And it makes sense. And I think you just really clearly said it. So at the bottom of the screen, it shows the title, which is Gender Inclusion at Work. However, the subtitle is a guide to supporting transgender and non-binary employees, clients, and colleagues. And so here is the visual. So there's a little meat on the bones of this book here. However, I think the meat in this case is good because, number one, it was very intentionally laid out in a visual way that makes it easy to read, even if it is a lot of words on the page. But I think what you did that is brilliant with this is that you made it a choose your own adventure. So can we talk a little bit about like why that made sense for you to do it that way and what your hope is for the reader?
Absolutely. And it speaks exactly to the silos that I was talking about. So this is in the same style that I give my workshops. The first 4 chapters of the book are for absolutely everyone. Everyone should read the first 4 chapters. It's why gender inclusion at work matters. It's the terminology, all of the things you need to understand to get started. Common do's and don'ts, verbal, nonverbal, and written communication strategies. All for absolutely everyone, not even necessarily just for business.
Yeah.
But then the next 10 chapters are a chapter per department. So there is an IT chapter, there's a facilities chapter, there's an HR chapter, there's a leadership chapter. There's a legal chapter, which is also really for law firms, since I have so much experience with them. And so and actually on the 15th chapter, the last chapter is case studies, businesses that are implementing gender inclusive practices. And it's a very honest look at, some of them are messy. They're not always perfect. There's sometimes 2 steps forward, 1 step back. And my favorite case study actually is of the city of Philadelphia. And I am a Philly person. I love Philly. Go Birds, by the way. But it's a messy story about how they're inclusive. So the book really isn't meant, if you're a leader or an HR person, you definitely might read the book cover to cover. But otherwise, you read the first 4 chapters and then you read whatever department you're leading or working in, and you hold on to the book for when you change careers or switch departments or want to understand something about a different department. So it's very much a book that you can continually pick up and learn from.
Yeah, because instead of having, 10 mini versions of the book everything is in one. And what I think is great about this too is that if you're in one department and you're having a conversation with a colleague and they say, oh, you mentioned something about what you've learned from it, you can hand them the book and say, hey, here's the legal chapter. Why don't you take a look at it? And if they feel compelled, they can get the whole book. But at least it provides that easily passing along, because then the responsibility is really reading the single chapter that is the most relevant to you and what you're trying to accomplish in your organization.
Absolutely. And there are spots that refer to other chapters. So sometimes it will lead you in different directions depending on what you're interested in and what you're doing.
Yeah, which is the beautiful part about having like a pick your path type of book.
It was a long process to figure out how to make this book lay out in a way that people could read. I was trying to figure out how to make it's so easy for me to give talks and workshops, but I've never tried to put it all into a book. And so fitting it into something that would lay out easily, there's actually there's a lot on resistance, on tackling resistance, but that's actually in 3 different chapters, because the leadership chapter has resistance from stakeholders, and the HR chapter has resistance from employees, and the marketing chapter has resistance from customers.
Yeah.
So it's very much a pick and choose what is relevant for you book.
Yeah, which I very much love. And I feel like it would be remiss without me just acknowledging and noting the timing of this book coming out. So at least at the time of this recording, someone might be watching this much further down the line. We're in August of 2025. So your book was originally supposed to come out way earlier this year. So do you care to kind of share the journey and that little ride we went on?
Yes. And I wrote this book. I spent 3 years researching and writing this book. The book was completely finished before anyone announced who would be running for president. As I was shopping for publishers, Trump announced that he was running. So Jen, you'll remember this story really well, when I started interviewing publishers, and my biggest concern was, what happens if he wins? I'm sure he won't, but what happens if he wins? What can we do? And so sure enough, it happened. And my book, we decided we would get the book out as quickly as we possibly could. We'll just get it out really fast. And so we were on the fast track to get the book out. And then he won the election, and then the executive orders all started to come out. No DEI, trans people started getting erased from everything. And some of my case studies, the websites like TSA, which was doing incredible stuff and making tons of forward progress, they pulled the website. The whole trans portion of the TSA website was taken down. So I, thanks to you and Publisher Purpose, I pulled the book from publication and had to rewrite the book. Now, I didn't delete anything. I realized the timing was so, I struggle sometimes between calling it great and terrible all at once. But I feel like I'm a bit of the keeper of the records, because I had all of these websites and I had been tracking all of this forward progress. So, and then everything was taken down. So I archived a lot of these sites that were removed. And instead of getting rid of case studies and businesses and stories, I kept them, and I pointed to the archived versions of the websites and the current versions of the websites. And I edited things and added text to explain that, just how wrong all of this is. And that I don't want, one of my biggest fears was that if I deleted everything, no one would ever know that the progress we were making, if this didn't return to sanity, which I am absolutely positive it will, but still, I don't know when.
Yeah,
so
might be a while.
So yeah, the book ended up coming out a lot later than we had intended, but it's much more timely and relevant now.
And you know what's interesting is that we're really, if we want to say, off of our original timeline by like 6 months or so. Yeah. So just think about the Herculean effort that went in on your part of rewriting an entire book that you took like 2 years, 3 years up to that point, and we're like, I need to, otherwise it would have been completely tone deaf, right? So we can't have that.
Yeah.
So if you think about it, you were able to rewrite it and get it published still within a 6-month period of time, which is almost unheard of.
It's true. It's true. I mean, the publishing process, I know nothing about the publishing process. So I love the experience and all of the control I had. But yeah, I mean, I basically stopped for 6 months to rewrite the book. So you're right. We had fast tracked. We decided we were fast tracking the publication, and we certainly did, minus the extra 6 months I took to rewrite the book.
Little detail. minor inconvenience.
Yeah.
So if you think about basically what has happened, I love that you, like, I just remember when you were doing all the archiving, like how impressive it because that is also an undertaking, is to be archiving all of this, because I think it is important from a historical standpoint to have seen that we really were making some significant strides.
So much progress. Do you know, when I first started doing this, I would say, even when I would talk to businesses at networking events, I would say, look, I don't care if you want to do this because you know it's the right thing, or you just don't want to get sued, because that's the direction the world is going and you need to keep up. I'll help you either way. And now the people that I talk to are different now, because if you hated all this but just needed to keep up with the times, you feel safer hating all of this. You know, and now it's much more geared toward allies who are ticked off and want to fight back.
Yeah. And what I almost imagine this book becoming, because, you know, part of the conversations are like, what does the cover look like? How passable is the book itself? Like, if someone's holding the book and carrying the book, is it screaming, you know, trans or non-binary? And the answer is no. So, which is by design, because I think what will continue to happen is that there are a lot of people in a lot of positions of authority in a lot of different organizations who are still doing the work and moving things forward. It's just very dangerous for them to be very public about it. And so I feel like your book is going to be one of those under the radar type of books where people might not be publicly saying, oh my God, I just read this most amazing book. Maybe they're even a little bit afraid to leave an Amazon review for the book. And if people are reading it and you do support this work and you are not afraid to leave a review, please do so, because they really do help. So I think that it's almost like this underground movement that you are kind of leading the way on.
Yeah, you know, when I first wrote the book and when we first started working on the cover, it was really important to me, before all of this administration stuff happened, that this book was treated like a business book. I didn't want it to be the colors of the trans flag or the non-binary flag, partly because I'm part of my purpose here is to normalize that gender isn't necessarily binary, and what would a world look like if we just understood more and accepted more of people. And so I think of this so much more than an LGBTQ book. I think of it as a business book. But then when everything happened and the world caught on fire, I realized even more it would be important for people to comfortably walk around with this on the subway and be able to read it. Plus, I always wanted an orange book because, you know, I'm a redhead.
Obviously.
You get it.
Yeah. And I think that's important. And I feel like, you know, not as a PSA for like PYP specifically, but just in general, is that when you're doing something that has this amount of significance and importance, it's important to find the right thought partner that can help you navigate those waters, to say, because I can see easily how so many others would have been like, it needs to be in, you know, the trans flag colors, because at least the trans flag colors are more of a known thing now than like the non-binary flag. Right. And like that would absolutely defeat the purpose of what you're trying to do, because I also look at this as a business book. Like, it very much is a business book.
Yeah. And the audience for this book are cis people. The audience for this book are allies and business professionals who just want to, you know, I talk a lot about kindness and how important it is. It's very easy to be kind. People always say it's so easy to be kind. It takes nothing to be kind. I don't totally agree with that. It takes nothing to be kind to people who are exactly like you. It takes a lot sometimes to be kind to people who are totally different than you, because you don't maybe know what to say, or you don't know the words, or you don't know a lot of things, what to say or what not to say. So this book is really written for people who aren't part of the community and want to be more kind. One of the things I see more than anything is silence, is people who they really feel pained by what's happening. They are angry and they do not like this. They fully disagree with it, but they don't speak up.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not because they don't want to, it's because they don't know what to say.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a huge driving force for me in everything I do, because kindness sometimes involves education,
Mm-hmm.
and that's okay. Mm-hmm. So this is a book to educate people on how to speak up.
Yeah. And I think what's really clear is your teaching history and background, because everything you do is simplifying complex things in ways. Because if somebody can teach lawyers how to use technology, I feel like you can actually do anything. That feels like you could truly do anything.
I actually have a component of my business I call technotherapy, where I teach, usually they're over 65, CEOs. I do private tech training of CEOs who had a big red appointment book before computers came out and the secretary, and they figured they wouldn't have to learn any of this. And I learned a lot figuring out how to break down what is now incredibly sophisticated technology into something that someone who never learned it and who learned differently than, you know, we all learned. A lot of us learned, if you learned before a certain year, you learned rote memorization. So you just want to know all of the things that you're supposed to do and not do. And if something pops up on a screen that isn't what you know, one of the 5 steps you learned, you completely freak out. So learning how to break everything down. I mean, I teach a lot of things that are, the things that I teach are all of the things that most people find uncomfortable and complicated. I teach meditation, I teach communication, I teach technology, and I teach inclusion. And they're all things that require breaking down into really simple, easy to understand things. And that actually is very, very comfortable for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which obviously your comfort in that space is a superpower, because you are able to kind of to teach people. So again, if you can teach a lawyer who's, you know, never used a computer before to be able, like, if you can do that, then teaching people about inclusion around gender, I feel like it almost feels like the easier path.
Yeah, not to diss lawyers at all. Just
no, not at all. Can we go back to what you were saying about sometimes it's like the silence that's the hard part? Sure. Like if you were to obviously read the book, that will certainly fast track someone, but what would you say to somebody if maybe they're working in an environment right now where there is some kind of maybe contentious conversation that's happening around gender in the workplace, and they feel like they are an ally, but they do not know how to say anything that they feel would be helpful, or they want to be an ally to a coworker who is a trans person or non-binary person, but they don't want to just roll in and be like, hey, I love trans people, because that's not necessarily the best approach. Like, what is there, like 1 or 2 little things you might say that might make them feel more comfortable?
Yeah, there are a lot of things that I could say about that. First off, and this is a really tiny thing, but wearing, you know, a little button or a little pin or something with trans colors on it that says that you're supportive is not against company policy and says that you are supportive without actually saying anything. You know, they have lanyards and there's lots of different things that people have. That's one way. I'm a big fan of bystander intervention. So when someone, for example, when someone misgenders a colleague in front of you, one of the things that I always talk about is first off, have a conversation with that person. Not everyone wants you to be their champion. Mm-hmm. You know, that's a common misconception. Not everybody wants you to stand up and speak for them. Mm-hmm. So one thing I always say is, if you are supportive of someone at work, talk to them, have a private conversation. Hey, how can I support you? If I see you get misgendered, do you want me to correct them? Do you want me to correct them? Or should I not say anything, so that you know that you're doing something that is representing what that person wants? There's another way that I do it that avoids a lot. And also, I just want to make the point that your own safety is also important. So you don't want to criticize your boss if that's going to get you fired. You know, there's a line that we all know that we can't always cross. It's just figuring out where that line is. But the thing that I do, if somebody is at work and let's say Sarah is a trans woman and someone at work says, dead names or misgenders Sarah and uses the wrong pronoun or uses their old name, the way that I'll handle it is I won't correct them right then. I'll just immediately say something kind of unrelated, like, hey, does anybody know how Sarah takes her coffee? I was going to go get coffee. Does Sarah like sugar in her coffee? And all the time it happens that someone will catch on and go, oh, Sarah, you know, and they'll catch themselves, but not because I corrected them and not because I made them the center of the room. I'll just figure out a way to say something right then about that person using their correct name and pronoun.
Yeah, I think that's such an easy, brilliant way to do it. I also do something similar. And you know, if it's, because I feel like usually you can tell if there's intentionality behind misgendering somebody. Most of the time it just like people aren't fully plugged in and thinking, and then you can see like, oh, and they like catch themselves, but then they don't want to make a big deal and then say something because then it draws attention. And I think we both know that the shame and blame game serves nobody. So pulling someone aside quietly, being like, hey, I keep seeing that you're tripping up on Amelia's pronouns. Like, is there something I can kind of help you do that would, but not doing it in a group setting, because then they're going to feel awful and call out.
Exactly. There's a lot to that too. The silence thing. Another thing that I see all the time with silence is when you misgender someone, you feel so bad inside that you just roll over it and you keep going. And in your head, you're already moved on 3 sentences, but in your head, you're like, oh my God, I hope they didn't catch it. I hope they didn't catch it. I can tell you for trans people everywhere, we always catch it. Always, 100% of the time. We always know when we are misgendered. And what you think in your head if it doesn't come out at all, we don't know that you caught yourself. We don't know that you realized that you misgendered yourself, that you misgendered us. We just see that you kept going and you didn't care is what we will take. And the absolute best thing to do if you misgender someone, if you want one great tip for the day, is there's 2 ways. Either misgender, say, oh, sorry, and keep going, or just repeat the sentence with the right pronoun. The exact same sentence again with the right pronoun, and then keep going. The one thing you don't want to do is go on and on and on about how bad you feel, which is legitimate. Your feelings are valid. But the biggest lesson about being an ally is learning to not make it about you. It's about them. And when you go on and on and on, you are actually putting the trans person in the position of helping you feel better about what you did. And it switches roles and it is very uncomfortable. So I think recognizing your intent versus your impact. You know, I may intend to be, when I tell someone my pronouns are they, them, who has known me for a long time, sometimes they will start saying, oh, okay, I'm going to do my best. I'm really going to do my best. I hope I can get it right. I'm so sorry right now. If I don't get it right, I'm going to mess up a lot. And they go on and on and on. And I'm like, I don't know what to say to you.
Yeah.
I wasn't trying to make it this hard. I didn't want to, I just wanted you to know what they are. You'll try. I know you'll try.
Yeah.
You know, so I think, and that's part of the whole silence thing is what I tell people who tell me that they got the book. When you get the book through my website, I send you the tracking information. So you have my email address, and people always write back and they'll say, you know, I got the book, and if it's someone, when it's someone I know, I'll write chapter 2, 3, 4, 15, you know, because they're the ones that read them first, because they're the ones that tell you this kind of stuff, you know, this stuff that'll help you not be quiet because you're uncomfortable.
Let me ask you how this plays out in a virtual setting, and it's somewhat self-serving of a question, and it's all because I know how I would do this and have done this. But say you're in a virtual format and there's 12, 15 people on a call, and there's someone who is trans or non-binary on the call, and another person in that call, not you specifically, maybe you're the facilitator of said call, and someone misgenders the person that's in the room, and they didn't do one of the things that you said. They didn't kind of flip, or like, repeat the sentence or be like, oh, sorry, and then keep going. What would you advise? Because again, it's a similar situation, and you're not going to call that person out, because then that will make them feel bad, wrong, blame, shame, all that. Is there something you would advise the facilitator to do if they see that occurring, or is it just kind of leave it to the people to figure it out?
So it completely depends on the nature of the group I'm in, the purpose, what we've done to that point, because there are times when it is okay to point out, in that exact scenario, when it is okay to point out, here's a great example, as long as you're not singling out that person and you immediately start talking about the experience, and you don't go ask the person who just got misgendered, and how do you feel? Nothing like that. But there are times when it is okay to bring it up in a setting. Most of the time, though, I'll do the exact same thing that I talked about with Sarah and her coffee. You know, I'll come back to saying it, and this has actually happened, and I'll say it using that correct pronoun, and the person in the virtual setting will actually come on and say, oh, I did it wrong, I'm sorry. And then we can talk about it. But that one trick works in so many settings. It's hard to explain to people sometimes what you don't want to say. I make myself available for any kind of question. I don't like to say safe space. I don't create safe spaces, because when there's more than me in the room, I can't vouch for everybody in the room. So I can't create safe spaces. I can say that I am a safe space. I open myself up to be someone to take questions that you might not want, you don't know if you can ask. And then it's my job to explain that you don't actually want to ask that question out loud to people, and here's why. And that's hard. It's hard in tech spaces. It's like it's hard to tell somebody their baby is ugly. You can't tell somebody that they don't do that. But like the biggest one is, I have an article that I wrote called "Let's Not Ask Trans People If They've Had the Surgery." It's a huge one. And people will ask all the time in classes, and I will explain and have to single out that the question was asked. I have to point out the fact that here's the reason why you don't want to ask this question, and why I won't answer the question. But once they hear the explanation, nobody feels.
Yeah, because they just don't know. I think that's the problem, is that people just don't know what they don't know about anything, right? And so until someone is going to take the time and slow down and say it to them in a way that does not shame and blame, and they can be like, oh. And then that brings into the next conversation, because they're like, oh, that's right, Amelia said, don't do this, but do this instead. Now they have like you as the voice in their head as they're moving into other interactions, or whomever that voice is.
Yes. So I'm a Gen X, and if you're Gen X or a baby boomer, we got a lot of information wrong. I mean, the people who are watching this that follow me on LinkedIn know I post about this stuff all the time. We got a lot of stuff wrong. We were the John Hughes movie lovers, the 16 Candles worshipers. We followed bad stuff, and a lot of that pertains to trans people. We got a lot of bad information about trans people. I used to get really ticked off when people would ask, did you have the surgery? And then I realized it was only Gen Xers and baby boomers who were asking the question. And then I realized it's because we got wrong information. We were actually taught that the word transition meant surgery. That you weren't transitioned. We didn't understand social transition. We didn't understand a lot of this. Just like allies used to say preferred pronouns, and that was considered great. And now we know that's not so great. So, having to explain to people who were taught bad information it's super helpful for them. I don't really get pushback from people. I always compare the surgery thing to, so you're walking down the street and you're you're carrying your little baby, and I come up to you and I say, oh, your baby's so beautiful. Boy or girl? And you say boy, and I say, oh, was he circumcised? And every single person in the room recoils in horror that I asked that. And I'm like, right, you just asked what's between somebody's legs.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden all the light bulbs go off, like, oh, I did that about a trans person. We learned to dehumanize trans people. That's honestly the only reason why the administrative in the UK, in everywhere in the world right now, the reason it's working is because everybody's silent, and because we learned to dehumanize a group of people to the point that we have conversations about what they're allowed to do. Once you're discussing without somebody what somebody is allowed to do, you're not treating them like a person. So the real information to get out there that I'm so desperate to get out there is to recognize that we got wrong information, and to recognize that we've been dehumanizing a group of people so that we can do better. And then we cannot be silent.
Yeah, and I think your distinction of recognizing that we were taught wrong is very different than someone saying you are wrong.
Absolutely.
Because I think that is a huge part of our challenges in the present day, is that there are people who are feeling like they are just completely being told that they're 100% wrong. And then that questions people's like internal belief systems and like who they are. And then they're not going to want to admit that. And so now they're going to go the opposite direction, which is going to be more forceful versus just being like, we were taught wrong. I think that is such a beautiful, simple way of looking at it, because we've been taught wrong about a lot of things. And we just need the self-awareness to be like, maybe I should look at it differently. And maybe there's something I can learn here.
Right. So I call it unlearning a lot. There's a lot of unlearning that has to happen before you can really learn a new thing. Is recognizing the fact that you were given some bad information, and that's not your fault. That's what we knew at the time. We I don't even want to say some of the stuff that was in some of the movies that I loved. And sometimes you don't even realize it. If any of you have ever played a movie for your child that was one of your favorite movies, and you put it on for your kid, and your kid is like horrified, I cannot believe. And while you're watching it, now you're watching it through your kid's eyes, and suddenly you recognize that this is gross. And I worshiped this movie growing up. Until it gets pointed out to you, you can't unlearn it, because the memories of what we learned are pristine.
Yeah. My God, there's and all of these things are available in this delightful bundle here. This
dense book.
Yes, it is dense, but just remember, it is still like, it's just very formatted in a way that's very readable, very skimmable, and it's a choose your own adventure. So you don't have to read the entire density. You certainly can and are encouraged to, but you don't have to. Like you said, 2, 3, 4, and whatever number chapter.
15, yeah. And the first chapter. So I have something called dyscalculia, which is like a numbers dyslexia. I'm very, very bad with numbers. I hate numbers. So the only chapter in the book is the first chapter that is loaded with statistics and numbers. If you're a numbers person, you'll love it. But it actually explains why we care, why it matters. And it explains a lot about Gen Z, who is, so I give a lot of talks to law firms about Gen Z, and I'm like an expert in understanding what they want from work and what you need to be able to do to hire Gen Z. And Gen Zs are very different than millennials. They're very different than everybody. And I call them the gender bendy generation, because they're not playing our game. They're not interested in any of that. And you have to be gender friendly if your goal over the next 10 or 15 years is to hire Gen Z, you've got to understand them. And the first chapter covers a lot of that and why it matters, but it's a lot of numbers. So I always say 2, 3, 4, and 15 because I hate numbers.
Skip right past 1. I love it.
Really, the first 4 chapters.
That's so good. All right. So last question. If you're waving a magic wand and someone rolls into your DMs, into an email, bumps into you at an event and says, oh my God, Amelia, I read your book, and what is the thing that you're hoping that they say to you?
I read your book, and I'm getting a copy for every leader in the company, and we will be implementing this change immediately.
Yes.
Can you come and help me?
Yeah.
That would be perfect. I get amazing, the messages that I've been getting have been incredible. I get people who tell me how much they're moved by this. One person told me that they're taking snapshots of all of my posts and taking them to their PFLAG meeting, and helping other parents with this information.
Yeah.
I get great messages. If I could wave a magic wand, and the book just came out, but if I could wave a magic wand, it would be that businesses are actually implementing real change across departments. And the stuff in this book isn't dependent. This isn't about the executive orders. This is just about how to treat people kindly with respect and dignity. This has nothing to do with what you're being told. First of all, none of those things are laws. The first thing. And being silent is complying with a lot of that. So implementing the things in this book are really just being nice to people. This isn't something that's going to get you flagged as, a problematic business, because you treat everyone in your company with respect and dignity.
Yeah, it really shouldn't be that complicated.
Yeah.
But somehow our political system has found a way to make it complicated where it doesn't need to be, because it really is. It's basic human decency at the end of the day.
That's it. That's all it is. It's just understanding how to be kinder to people that you never understood before. That's it.
And it goes in all directions, right? Like, we all travel in certain groups that we're most familiar with. And like, at the end of the day, like, get out of your comfort zone and go hang out with a community that's not typically where you hang out, and learn, and just be kind. Show up with like genuine sincerity.
Right. And it's okay to admit that you don't know how to be kind to a certain group. That's totally legitimate. I don't want to be silent. I'm silent because I'm uncomfortable. Read the book, unlearn to learn.
Yeah. Oh, this has been such a good conversation. I have been waiting to have this conversation with you, as I've said to you many times, since whenever it is that we first started this process, which was quite some time ago.
Yes.
So I'm glad that we are finally here. And as you said, like, for those who are watching live or within the month of August, like, it is hot off the press, like fresh. So go out there, please leave Amelia a review. I cannot emphasize that enough. It's so important. And then your website is scrolling along the bottom of the video. So it's ameliajmichael.com, and they can find all of the ways in which they can work with you individually, company-wide, whatever, right?
There is also a free chapter 2, the chapter on terminology is free to download on my website. So you can start to unlearn before you even buy the book.
Yeah, I love that the decision was to do chapter 2, because it's such a fast, easy, no commitment, able to kind of learn. And Jay Goodman has said thank you very much in the comments. So thank you, Jay, for joining us. Thank you, Amelia. I really appreciate you. I'm so happy this is out in the world.
I am so grateful to you. I don't even have the words. This book wouldn't be this book without you. So thank you so much.
Yeah, you are very welcome. And everybody.